Hello and welcome. I'm Eddie Huffman, Director of Operations at the International Bluegrass Music Association, and we're proud to partner with the Mechanical Licensing Collective to present this first installment of a new virtual content series, IBMA 365, and we're excited to kick things off with such an important and timely topic as this. We have people joining, it looks like. And so, feel free to, connect with one another through chat, perhaps, let us know where you're tuning in from, etc. And, so we'll just kind of wait just a minute as people come on. But, our topic today, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, how songwriters can collect licensing income for digital streams. It's important, it's timely, coming out of the Music Modernization Act. And, so we're fortunate today to have two amazing industry leaders with us to help us understand what the MLC is, what it does, and how it impacts our music community and more broadly. Chris Ahrend serves as the Chief Executive Officer for the MLC, where he leads the organization's mission to ensure songwriters, composers, lyricists, and music publishers receive their mechanical royalties from streaming and download services. Prior to his role at the MLC, Chris held a senior executive role at Warner Music, launching its Center of Excellence for Shared Services, and he's held leadership roles at Rhino Entertainment, Sony BMG Music Entertainment, and the law department at Sony Music. Chris serves on the boards of the Nashville Chamber of Commerce, the Nashville Downtown Partnership, and is a member of the Music City Music Alliance. Along with Chris, we're fortunate to have one of the most multifaceted minds in roots music, Allison Brown. Allison is a Grammy Award-winning banjoist and co-founder of the Nashville-based Compass Records Group, which celebrated its 25th anniversary this past year in 2020, and has been described by Billboard Music as, quote, one of the greatest independent labels of the last decade. Allison has received a USA Artist Fellowship in Music, Women in Music's Touchstone Award, a Distinguished Achievement Award from the IBMA, and she has previously served on boards of the Nashville Chamber of Commerce, the IBMA, and is currently a governor of the Recording Academy. So thank you both for being here. We're really fortunate and just excited to have you as we explore this, really important topic. So, I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Hey, wonderful. Eddie, thank you so much for the intro and for helping us put this event together with your members. Allison, thanks so much for joining. I am honored and thrilled to be here with you. I certainly count myself as a fan of yours, and congratulations on the 25th anniversary of your label. That is no small accomplishment in our business, and certainly is a testament to the many talents that you possess. So thanks for bringing music to us for so long.
Thank you.
And thanks so many of you for being here. It's great to see in the chat. We've got folks from every corner of the country, the Northeast, the far West, lots of folks in and around Tennessee, North Carolina, Birmingham. And it's always fun to see the weather reports. So it seems like in the Pacific Northwest, a little rainy, not a surprise. Sunny a little bit further east, and I imagine folks up in the Northeast are still digging out from all that snow. But so happy that so many of you could be here. And I see Toronto too, so we're officially international, which is fantastic. The plan for today is we're going to break the hour into 3 segments. And we do this a lot. It seems to work really well. For the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to run pretty quickly through a deck that just gives you a really broad overview of the MLC and provide some foundational information that'll help us all level set our understanding. And then from there, I'll bring in Allison, and she's got some questions that she has worked on that we think will be of interest to all of you. And then the last third of the hour we'll spend with questions from all of you. And the only thing that I would ask is if you do have a question, please put that in the Q&A section. You'll see at the bottom of Zoom, there are a bunch of buttons, and toward the middle, there's Q&A. It's right next to chat. I see a lot of you on chat, so you've obviously found that one. The reason that we ask you to put the questions in the Q&A box is that it's easier for us to keep track of those and then move them into the answered category once we've answered them so that we don't miss any. And when they're in the chat sometimes, especially with a group like this that's very chatty, sometimes the questions get bumped right out of view before we have a chance to see them. So if you use the Q&A, we stand a better chance of seeing them and hopefully answering them. And we'll try to race through as many questions as we can. I will say up front, we've got a really great website, and I don't say that because I had much to do with it, but our marketing team led by Ellen Truly and Kayla, who's with us, and Lacey behind the scenes, they've done a fantastic job putting together a ton of really helpful informational content, educational content that is there for you. So please also visit our website, and you'll see that address in the chat momentarily, if not already. It's a great place to find more information and hopefully to find answers to questions that we don't get to today. We also have a really great support team. I think we've got now 15 or 16 people, maybe more, that answer the phones 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. On Saturdays, it's only 9 hours, but they're there to answer your questions and help you through the process of connecting with us one-on-one. So don't hesitate to call. That's why they're there, to help you. So with that introduction, I'm gonna share my screen, or at least try. And we'll see if I'm successful in doing that. And hopefully, Allison, can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see you great.
All right, so we're off. So the MLC, hopefully by now you've at least heard of us. You may also have heard of a pretty landmark piece of legislation that our Congress passed a couple of years ago called the Music Modernization Act, or the MMA. That law is what led to the creation of the MLC. And while the law covered a lot of different areas of interest to folks in the music business, one of the titles in that law, the one that was most relevant to what we're here to talk about, was the one that addressed a significant problem that existed in the market and may well have affected many of you. And that was that digital services, under the law they're referred to as digital music providers, they were not successfully licensing mechanical rights from songwriters and publishers, and then they were not paying those writers and publishers properly. And that became a really significant issue, and it was significant enough that it led a pretty broad group of people, a coalition of folks in the industry, to get together, and ultimately, with the support of the services, to lobby to pass this law. And the law created a new blanket license, essentially a way for those services to get a license that covers every song in the world that exists that they might want to put up on their service. And then an organization, which is now the MLC, to act as a clearinghouse or a connection between them and then all the folks that need to be paid. So the MLC's job is basically to collect data and money from those digital services in connection with their use of songs on their services, and then to make sure we match the mechanicals they pay to the right writers or publishers, and then pay them that money. And that's what the diagram on the right represents. But so in short, digital audio services, MLC, and you, if you are a self-administered songwriter, or if you are a publisher, or both, we are this connection or conduit between them and you for getting you money that you have earned because your works are available on these services and they're being used, listened to by consumers every day. A couple other points to note: the MLC is the exclusive administrator of that new blanket license. And what that means is we're the only place that you'll be able to get those mechanical royalties. And that's why it's so important for anyone who might be eligible to receive those monies to become a member of the MLC. That's how we will be able to pay you. So as you think about things today, and we're going to get into this now in a moment, there are lots of different revenue streams that you've got to be thinking about if you work professionally in our industry, and that gets very confusing. But know that this revenue stream, these mechanicals for digital audio uses in the US, it can only flow through the MLC. And so you want to connect with us so that you don't leave that money behind. So let's just take a step back, because I know many of you are creators. And when you wake up in the morning and you think about creating, you don't think to yourself, I'm going to sit down today and create a copyright in the musical work. You think, I'm going to write a song. And often you're writing a song while you're playing an instrument. You're performing and writing at the same time. Many of you are performers and you record your performances. And so you also have an interest in the sound recording. But there are two parts to our business, or two kind of sets of rights that we need to think about, and they originate with either the song or the recording. So at a high level, there are songs and compositions. The law calls those musical works. And then there are the recordings or sound recordings that feature the performances of those songs. And that's a really important distinction to think about and to remember. And anytime you're in a conversation about the business side of the business or your rights, it's important to start by saying, okay, am I talking about the song side or the recording side, especially if you're involved in both? So the MLC is involved with the song side of the business. So we are relevant to songwriters, composers, or lyricists. Forgive me, this says your clients. We did a version of this last week for some manager organizations, and that's why clients kind of stuck in there. But you can ignore that and know that if you're a songwriter, a composer, or a lyricist, or if you have a publishing company or otherwise work with songwriters, composers, or lyricists, then what the MLC does is relevant to you. There are a number of rights under copyright law that folks who create musical works have, but there are three that I'll talk about right now because they deal directly with the two big revenue streams that you might be familiar with. The rights to reproduce works in phonorecords and then to distribute those works, those get covered by what's called a mechanical license. You've probably heard about that. It's been around for 100 years, dates back to the player piano days. When publishing was licensed for those piano rolls that go into the pianos. And then the pianos were mechanically operated in order to generate the sound. So the mechanical license covers the right to reproduce or make copies of your songs and then to distribute those copies in the form of things like phonorecords. The other right is the public performance right. And the easiest way to think about that is radio, right? When a song is performed on the radio for anyone to hear, that triggers a separate right, a performance right, and that requires a performance license. So the MLC deals with the mechanical license, not the performance license. That then leads to this slide, which is a helpful way to, again, really hone in on what we will be collecting on and what we will be paying you for. The blanket license only covers digital audio mechanical rights, and it only covers those rights for uses of your works in the United States. So what that means is the license will cover things like interactive streams. Think those digital services like a Spotify or an Amazon Music, where you can go in and select the song you want to listen to, and then the next one, and you can keep selecting the songs as much as you want. You always have the choice. By contrast to a non-interactive service like an internet radio provider or a satellite radio service, where maybe you can pick a station, like a Bluegrass station, but you can't choose an Allison Brown song, followed by an Alison Krauss song, and then a Nickel Creek song. They choose what you hear. So interactive streams are covered by the blanket, and then downloads. Most of us think about permanent downloads. You buy a track from iTunes, and then you can store that on your devices forever. There are also limited downloads where they get stored on your device as long as you're connected to the service, but you can use them when you don't have a Wi-Fi connection. So that's what we do. And you can see there are some things that we don't do that also require mechanical license, like physical uses, CD, vinyl, cassettes, and then again, video. We are not able to administer rights for video. That's different. So I know I covered a lot, but this next slide kind of puts it all together. So again, if we start from the top, there are musical works and sound recordings. And what we administer is a set of rights and some revenue that relates to the musical works or songs. There are mechanical rights and performance rights for songs. We administer a set of rights and we'll be collecting and distributing revenue related to mechanicals. There are digital uses and physical uses. We will be collecting and distributing monies related to digital uses. There's audio only and audio visual, and we will be dealing with audio only uses. And finally, the specific uses that we'll be paying you for are interactive streams and those types of downloads, not interactive streams. So if you put all that together, this shows you all the different revenue streams, or at least some of the significant ones that you might be collecting right now. And if you're not, should be, because of course you've earned it, it's your money. The MLC will cover those two on the left, and then each one of those other boxes is a separate revenue stream that some other organization will be collecting for you, or that you can collect from another organization. So you want to make sure you're thinking about how do you solve for all of those. And of course, the sound recording piece is only relevant if you're a performer, but that hopefully helps you see how the MLC fits into that broader set of revenue streams. The other day we talked about it as it was a sandwich, right? You've got this revenue sandwich, and each one of these represents a slice. So think about us as, you know, the first two slices were the tomatoes and the lettuce, and then you can keep adding on your sandwich all those other revenue streams, but you want to make sure you get them all. And I should add, lyrics is yet another slice of that sandwich, and those get handled separately. We do not administer lyric rights either. To kind of repeat that one last time, there's certain things the MLC will do and certain things that we cannot do because the law does not permit us to do them. What we will do is administer that new blanket license. To do that, we have established and will maintain a public database of musical works ownership information. And that database is available live right now. To go to our homepage, and you go to the top right, you'll see a yellow button that says Public Search. You click on that, you can search for all of the data that's in our database. If you're a writer, I would encourage you to go check it out, search your name and see what data we have for the songs you've written. You can do that regardless of whether you're administering your own stuff or you have a publishing partner or any other partner. That database has all the data and it's free for anyone to look at. We will also receive and then match the sound recording usage data we receive from the digital services with those musical works ownership data points that we have for you. And we'll use that to then collect and distribute royalties to the proper rights holders. One other note there, you'll notice tucked in that last kind of check mark on the left, foreign mechanical rights organizations. You may have recalled earlier, I said the blanket license is only available for services for their US operations, and that's true. But what we know is we live in a global world today, and often the music that we listen to comes from other places, or it goes to other places. So in this case, because we are administering a license that covers the use of any song on a US service, there are no doubt songs that originate from songwriters from all around the world. And they're just as entitled to receive their mechanicals from us as anyone who is based here. So for our friend from Toronto, know that we will pay you in Toronto if you are self-administered in the same way that we pay the person from Birmingham. It does not matter to us whatsoever. We just have to get the right tax and banking information from you. And that means that we will be paying members located all around the world. What we will not do, we can't administer those performance royalties. So again, if you have a PRO today like ASCAP or BMI, CSAC or GMR, and there are a number of smaller other PROs that are spinning up, keep that relationship because they're going to keep paying you a really important revenue stream that is different from the one that we collect. Similarly, if you're a sound recording artist, if you perform for sound recordings and you own your own sound recordings, stay in touch with Sound Exchange because they collect the digital performance royalties that you're entitled to as a performer or a record label, and those are also different. We cannot administer those rights. If you still have CDs or if you record songs that others, if you write songs that others record for CDs, vinyl, know that the mechanical right is still required for those, and someone should be paying you on those uses as well. We can't administer those rights, but you should still be getting paid mechanicals for the physical products that feature your songs. And then of course, audiovisual uses, things like the traditional YouTube video service or now TikTok. Your music is being used on an audiovisual service, someone should be paying you. And if your lyrics are being used, that is also a set of rights that people should be paying you for. So make sure that you're getting paid on your lyrics. And then finally, if you're a songwriter here and your works are being used outside the US, maybe one of your songs was recorded and it's released now on the digital services of Germany, know that you are still entitled to be paid mechanicals from those services in Germany. We won't be able to collect those monies for you, but that is still a revenue stream that you should be thinking about. So hopefully that helps you understand all the different ways you might be entitled to be paid today, which revenue stream the MLC will be paying starting later this spring, and where we fit in. So I'll close with a couple of key questions. Who should become a member? If you are a publisher or an administrator, and if again, you think about those foreign societies, we call them collective management organizations. If you're an organization that represents the rights and interests of a songwriter, and part of your responsibility is to collect money from the people who use those songs, you need to become a member of the MLC, because again, we are the only administrator of that new blanket license which means the only place that you'll be able to get that money for your songwriters is by connecting with us. So every publisher needs to connect with the MLC, and I am pleased to tell you that thousands have already done that. If you are a self-administered songwriter or a composer or lyricist, and again, the key is self-administered, that means you act as your own publisher, you collect those monies yourself, then you also should become a member for us, with us for the same reasons, because the only place you can get that revenue is from us. If, however, you are a songwriter and you've partnered with someone, perhaps you have a publisher, or you've hired an administrator, or if you own the sound recording rights to some of the songs and you distribute those through a third-party distributor like a TuneCore or a SoundCloud, to name a few, or CD Baby, some of those companies offer publishing administration services as well as distribution services for your sound recordings. You may also have selected those set of publishing admin services, in which case they'll be collecting the mechanicals for you. So if that's the situation for some of your works, know that you don't have to be a member with us for those works, because those companies can and will collect from you. But again, lots of writers have written lots of songs over their careers. And even if you had a publishing deal that covered 90% of your works, if you've still got 10 or 15 works in your catalog that are yours and that you self-administer, and those are up on those digital services because some recording of them is available, then you want to make sure you're a member with us for those 10 or 15 so that you can collect the mechanicals on those as well. I know that's a lot. We'll certainly be able to field more questions about that when we get to the end of the session. So how do you become a member? That's also really easy now. You go to our website, and right next to the public search button, you'll see that on my screen, there's a blue button and it says Connect to Collect. You click on that button and then it takes you right to the page where you can begin the sign-up process. Sign up is pretty easy. Membership is free. Under the law, the digital services that operate in the US in this digital audio space, they are required to pay 100% of the MLC's operating costs. We are not allowed to deduct any cost that we spend to operate the organization from the royalties we collect for you. So 100% of the royalties we receive will ultimately be distributed. That's the great news. So this costs you nothing, but you need to connect in order to connect with that revenue stream. We can't pay you if we don't know who you are, where you are, or we don't have information about your works. So please check out our website, go to Connect to Collect, and you can start the process. When will we start paying royalties? Mid to late April. The blanket license took effect as of January 1st, and there are a number of services that are already operating under the blanket. If you are interested in know which services, you can go to our website, and there's a tab under the How It Works section called Notices. And we publish all of the notices we receive from the digital services that have now indicated they want to operate under the blanket. So you can see who's already operating under it. By company, you can actually see a copy of their notice. And for those services that started in January, they're going to have to start sending us their first monthly usage reports in the next couple of weeks through to the end of the middle of March. It's like a 30-day window when they can send us those reports. And that will then allow us to start distributing royalties in mid to late April. And thereafter, we will account every month. The digital services account to us on a monthly basis, we'll account to you on a monthly basis. So every month thereafter, if you're signed up with us, we've got your work set up, you will get a check from the MLC for your mechanicals. What should you do now? Again, become a member if you fit into one of those categories described. Once you do become a member, check your data. The most important thing you can do is make sure that we know about all the songs you've written that are available on those services. If your data is in our system, then that gives us a much better chance of matching your songs with the sound recordings so that we can make that connection and pay you. And remember, as a songwriter, even if all of your songs are managed by a publisher or an administrator, you can still go into the public database and search your data for your songs for free and check and make sure it's accurate, right? Because if it isn't, your publisher won't be able to collect all the mechanicals that they need to collect and then share with you. So you can always check all of your data regardless of whether you're a member or not. But if you're a self-administered songwriter, it's that much more important that you check your data and make sure it's accurate, because that's how we'll be able to pay you directly on those works that you self-administer. Last thing is very practical, but again, like any organization that pays you, we can't do that if we don't know how to reach you. So we need your contact information. We need a bank where we can send money. Hopefully we can get you set up with electronic transfer. It's much easier for all of us, and it gets the money there instantly. But go into the portal, into the membership section. There's a tab called Maintenance, and then check to make sure that all your payment information is accurate. If you have any questions at all about any of this, call our support team. We've got a ton of people available, as I said earlier, 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Central to 8 p.m. Central, and then Saturday from 8 to 5. We have got really long hours and weekend hours because we know that 9 to 5 may not always be convenient for a lot of our members. So call us, we're here to help, and we'll spend as much time as we need walking you through the process one-on-one. So with that, and I think I'm doing reasonably good on time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to invite Allison to come on in, and we can talk about some of these initial questions that you posed.
Okay, well, that was great, Chris. I must say my head's spinning and I'm kind of used to thinking about this stuff. So just trying to think about just jumping back into the beginning, and I know you covered this, but for example, in my case, I self-publish my songs. So I write a song and I publish it under my company, Brown Nose Music. So I'm self-administered. So am I somebody who should join the MLC?
Yes, yes. And that's a really important point. You know, just because you're self-administered doesn't mean you can't have set up a publishing company of your own, right? Self-administered doesn't mean we pay you personally under your social security number. So if you're a writer and you self-administer and you set up a publishing company to collect your money, you're still self-administered. That's why self-published is another way to think about it. And yes, you should become a member so that we can make sure we're paying you your mechanicals. And we can certainly make sure that we get you hooked up with membership, Allison.
All right. But then if I did a publishing administration deal with somebody here in town, then it wouldn't be appropriate for me to join. Is that right?
Correct. And if you have a relationship with a publishing administrator, the most important thing you can do is just reach out to them. You know, we've been talking with a lot of administrators as well over the past year because they need to be prepared to, you know, offer this service or to connect with us as a part of the services they offer. So check with them. If an administrator is representing you, then they can do all that for you. But sometimes the relationship you have with an administrator is more akin to the relationship you might have with your accountant or your business manager or your lawyer, where they're doing those things in your name. They're just doing the work for you. And that's totally appropriate, right? Because this is not the sort of thing that everyone wants to do themselves. And if you can hire someone to do it, that's great. So it may be that you're going to set up membership in your name, but then create user accounts for those representatives so they can go into your member account and manage things for you. And we can set things up in lots of different ways. So again, talk with your administrator first, and they can hopefully help you think about the best way to get this set up for you. And then call our support team, and you can share the details of your personal situation with them, and they can help you figure out the best way to get connected.
Okay. All right, that sounds like a lot, but I think we can do it. So before you guys came along, I would have to upload my catalog to Harry Fox Agency to try to collect mechanical royalties on streams. Do I need to keep doing that if I become a member of MLC?
It's a great question. So one thing to know is Harry Fox is one of the companies that was providing services in this area before the MLC. And HFA provided services both to digital services and to publishers. They wear a lot of hats. But in this area, they were working for digital services and essentially helping them pay mechanicals. Music Reports is another company that many people are familiar with. They were also doing that. So if you were managing mechanicals for yourself, you were probably uploading data to HFA's database, you were sending data to Music Reports, and you may have been sending data to some other companies and to some digital services directly, because there were some digital services that did all this in-house. Going forward, the MLC will certainly be the first place you want to go because we'll now be handling all that administration for these digital audio mechanicals. But the thing to know is that companies like HFA and Music Reports will still be administering other rights. And there's even an area where they can continue to administer mechanical rights. That's if a digital service wants to maintain a direct license with a publisher or a rights holder. So for example, if you had a larger publishing company, you might still maintain a direct deal with one of those services. And those services could then hire HFA or MRI to be their administrator. So, so generally speaking, it's still good to make sure your data is in the hands of all those companies. But with HFA, there's an additional kind of piece of the story that's important. When our board was notified that we were selected to be the mechanical licensing collective about 18 months ago, they quickly convened and recognized that it would be difficult, if not impossible, for the MLC to put together a database of musical works data from scratch. And so what they did was they began a process of inviting companies that had large databases of musical works data to basically make a pitch to be our vendor, to help us set up that database and to provide their data as a starting point. And when we started the process, there were about 12 companies that expressed initial interest. And at the end, that was winnowed down, and we ultimately selected HFA to be our vendor. So what that means is that all of the data that we started with in our database came from HFA. And if you submitted data to HFA in the past, or if HFA had your data, it's probably already in our database. And as a vendor of the MLC, they still will continue to provide us new data. So if you were providing data to HFA and you want to still provide it to them, it will still get to us. In the other direction, HFA will have the ability to use our data because our data will be publicly available for anyone to use, including our vendors. And that is also true of MRI and the PROs and anyone else in the world. But it's going to be up to them to decide how they use it. So for HFA, I'm reasonably confident that they're going to be using our data because of the relationship we have with them as a vendor. And that's why you probably don't have to worry about sending it to both places. You can pick one or the other, and the one that works best for you is the answer that you should choose. But for those other companies, you want to keep in touch with them and see what they do. It may be that in a year or two, they'll say, hey, we actually now get all of our data in the first instance from the MLC, and therefore you don't have to send new registrations to them because they're going to get them from us if you submit them to us. But that's a part of the transition that we're all a part of now. So in the short term, always better to be safe, check with those other companies. But for HFA, you're probably safe sending it to them or us, knowing that we're going to get it either way. And they'll be able to access it on their end.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say is we're going towards a big dream of one database that everybody can access, whether you're a PRO or an MRO, but we're not quite there yet. And so you're probably okay to just put your information either in MLC's database or HFA's, but you could also just continue to populate both databases with new information. Is that kind of a good?
With HFA and MLC, I'd say you can pick one or the other. Okay. But I think for some of the other organizations, you want to keep sending data to them until they tell you otherwise. And certainly, as an example, on the PRO side, they've got a whole separate set of practices. Their data is not always identical to ours. ASCAP and IBMA just launched a fantastic new database called Songview, a shared database that some of you have heard about. So again, I would keep sending data to the people you've been sending data to, with the exception of HFA. And again, there you can keep sending it to HFA if you like, or you can start sending it to us. And I think one way or another, you'll be covered either way. But know this, the MMA did not set out to globalize or nationalize the registration process. It really set out to centralize the process of administering mechanicals for digital audio services. So that's where things have become more efficient. And I think what you'll see, Allison, over time is not so much a single global database to rule them all, but a lot more cooperation between organizations that maintain databases like the MLC, like ASCAP and BMI with Songview, and like other organizations outside the US, to make sure the data is flowing more freely between all those organizations. I think everyone recognizes that data should not be the currency by which any organization competes. And certainly in our case, we don't compete with anybody in that regard. So, and our data will be public for anyone to use. So our goal is to make sure that all the data we have that you are providing gets out to as many people in the world as possible. And I think over time that will make things easier and more streamlined for all of us.
Okay. Well, here's a question for you. So I know that the MLC is set up just to collect these mechanicals that were flowing for US uses. But, for in the Bluegrass world, there's, pretty strong international support too. In fact, we've got the International Bluegrass Music Association, which kind of speaks to that. So what do we self-administered publishers do to collect our mechanical royalties from streams in foreign territories?
That's a great question. And the short answer is there is no one answer. Certainly you can try to do that yourself. And if your music is primarily distributed in one or two countries outside the US, You might be able to do that directly by joining a collection society in that country. But you could also engage a sub-publisher or work with an administrator who specializes in collecting monies overseas. So there are lots of ways that you can do it. Unfortunately, there is no one-stop shop per se, though I think some of those companies out there are offering a version of that, and that they have reach in lots of countries. So again, it's a good question, and the MLC, cannot solve that because we're only allowed to collect in the U.S. So unfortunately, my answer will be to keep asking that question and to look for other partners that you can find to help you with that if you're not comfortable doing it yourself.
Yeah, because you did mention that one of the things that MLC does is it pays out to foreign entities for U.S. play. So I thought maybe under reciprocal rights. Why doesn't that apply in this case?
The law did not allow us to do that. So the law was very specific in authorizing the MLC, and it does not allow us to represent members in the US for purposes of overseas collection. So that's the simple answer. But for that, we could potentially set up reciprocal arrangements, but we're not legally permitted to do that.
Is that something that you might see down the road, or?
It is entirely possible. I think Congress was very intentional about taking a really big step forward to solve a very specific problem. And by no means was that the only problem that could have been solved, but it took a lot to get a really broad coalition of people to say this is a good thing to do. So I think once we get some experience behind us and we've hopefully shown that we can do this effectively, that might create the impetus for additional legislation that might change or expand the role that we can play. But again, right now, there is a ton in front of us that we have to do, and that will ultimately be determined by you as creators and others in the industry. So our job is not to lobby for expansion or for anything else. Our job is to fulfill the mandate that we've been given, and these are very important obligations that we have to all of you. And if we do that really well, then that will certainly put creators and others in a position where they can start to think about that next step.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so for the time being, the best thing a self-administered publisher like myself could do would be maybe to get a deal with Song Trust to pick up these royalties in foreign territories, or another administrator who has a sub-pub deal.
Exactly. And you mentioned Song Trust. I mean, they're one of the companies that does that, and they're certainly a very good company. People know them. One of their executives is on one of our advisory committees. So they're very much aware of and involved with the building of the MLC. But yeah, there are any number of other ways you can solve for that, including doing a sub-publishing deal. There are obviously lots of great local publishers around the world. There are multinational publishers where you can connect with them right here in Nashville, and they can set you up with a sub-pub deal outside the US. So lots of good options.
And are you seeing, how difficult is it for a small publisher to get a sub-pub deal these days?
Allison, I don't have a great answer for that, because that's not a part of the business that I'm active in. I'm not a publisher. I do think with the globalization of the music market, right, with the ability now for consumers of music to listen to music from anywhere in the world, that is creating opportunities for creators and rights holders to build revenue streams in other places. So of course, as more and more creators like you see your music being followed and people listening to your music in other countries, the value in creating a business there grows, right? Because that's a service that you need to perform either directly or through someone else. And for people that don't want to do it themselves, there's an opportunity there to step in and say, hey, I can help you connect with your music royalties in Japan. We see that a lot outside the US, where there are folks that are building companies to help local creators connect with the US market. Because just like it's hard for you to think, how do I connect with the South African music market, right? It's hard for someone in South Africa to connect with the US market, or the Chilean music market or the Brazilian market. So I do think as streaming continues to grow and we see that growth around the world, that increased accessibility to music that is not limited by geography will start to create more and more opportunities and interest among people that want to provide a service that fills that gap for creators.
Great. Do I have time for a few more questions, Chris?
Absolutely. I will stay as long as you'd like.
Okay. So I think that you've answered one of my questions, but did I hear you right that you're going to begin making distributions in April, you think?
Yeah, we're aiming mid to late April. And again, we have not yet received usage data. So one of the interesting challenges for us at the MLC is we are building things real time. But assuming that everything goes well and the usage reports that we begin to receive in a couple of weeks meet the specifications that we developed with the Copyright Office and the digital services, and everything else in our process goes reasonably smoothly, then we should begin distributions again mid to late April, and then every month thereafter.
Okay, great. And then probably the question that a lot of us are wondering, you know, this system and the flow of money has been so dysfunctional really for a number of years. So everyone's probably wondering about black box money and unmatched royalties, and what you're anticipating as far as, you know, the look back and what publishers might expect to see.
Sure. Let me break that down into two pieces. And in the first instance, I'll just start with what we'll receive for January. When you are administering rights like we will be in a market where there can be as many as 70 million or more sound recordings featuring tens of millions of musical works, it is almost inevitable that there will be some amount of unmatched activity. And the law was very cognizant of that. So one of the things that we will be doing is we will be maintaining any of those unmatched monies in an account that generates interest, such that we can pay interest on those monies to all of you once we're able to pay them. And that interest rate that we will pay out is set by the statute. It's the federal short-term rate. So it's a little bit better than probably the bank account rate you might get, albeit still modest because interest rates are low. But getting interest on money is a good thing. So we'll be maintaining those monies, accruing interest, and then doing our best to match them to you. The law also had a provision that allows digital services to choose to pay us all of their historic unmatched monies. So those are monies that they were not able to pay for whatever reason that relates to uses of your music before January 1st of this year. And those monies are due to be paid to us by February 15th. So in a couple of weeks, we'll know how many DSPs took advantage of that provision and how much money we will be receiving from them. And that pool of money will then also be put into accounts where it's accruing interest, that we can pay out interest from the time we receive it until the time we're able to pay it out. And we'll begin trying to match those monies as well. And that matching process will continue for several years. It will probably take us several months to even ramp it up enough to be able to start, making it available, because we have to do a ton of data cleanup behind the scenes. But what we will do later this spring or summer is make all of that available for folks to search. There'll be an element of search both in the public search and for members, of course. So you can look for unmatched monies that relate to your works. We're going to be doing that work, but we recognize that the more eyes on it, the better. And certainly we want your eyes on it if you're a rights holder. So all of us will be able to look at that. And if you are a member, you'll be able to claim works or revenue that you think relates to your works. And that process will continue, and hopefully we'll be able to match as much of it as possible. There is a point in the future, and it is years away. By law, it's at least 3 years away for the new money, and between 2 and 3 years away for that historical money before we can even begin to entertain distributing it. But eventually the law provides a mechanism for us to distribute those monies essentially to all the people for that period we were able to pay. And the reason for that provision is because the law didn't want that money to sit with the digital services, and it didn't want it to sit with the MLC forever, right? And a lot of collective management organizations around the world, they keep that money and maybe they use it to offset their administration costs. Maybe they fund educational initiatives for it. Maybe they give it to creators, but they have programs where they give grants. But all of those programs, they reflect some level of judgment in how best to spend the money. And in this case, our Congress is pretty clear. They didn't want us to be judging, how best to spend money that ultimately is yours and that we couldn't get to for whatever reason or challenge. So one way or another, that money will get distributed, but we're not in any rush to get to that point. Our focus is wholly on finding you and helping you find those monies that may be yours that were not paid. So that's yet another reason to get connected with us and start checking your data, because the more you check your data, the more accurate your data is, the more complete your data is, the more likely it is that we'll be able to match your works to some of that unmatched money and then get you paid that money as well.
Okay, so so then by February 15th, the DSPs that choose to pay through the unpaid royalties to MLC, you'll have that money, and then you'll be seeking to distribute it where you can match it over, in the spring or summer. But then the other money that you can't match, we'll be sitting with you guys for a couple of years until you can figure out a way to distribute it among your members. Is that right?
It'll be more like 3 or more, because again, we'll have to decide in consultation with our board and our unclaimed royalties committee at what point have we exhausted our ability to match meaningfully those monies, so that we stop doing that and then distribute it to rights holders. But yes, it would be, the law provides the process. We would distribute it essentially, if we had unmatched monies for a given month, years in the future, we would distribute the remaining money on a pro rata basis to all the folks to whom we had distributed money during that month. So in that way, again, if you are a self-administered songwriter and you get all of your data in the system and it's all accurate and you're now getting 100% of your mechanicals, at some point in the future, you may also receive an additional check, which would represent your pro rata share of that additional money we could not match. So you'll get more than 100%. In that way, the law seeks to make sure that no matter what happens, the benefit of that money goes to the rights holders, and it doesn't stay with us. So again, get your data set up, and that will ensure that you get 100% of what you're entitled to. And then at some point in the future, years from now, if there are unmatched monies that we do wind up distributing through that mechanism, you'll also get a share of that money as well.
And one quick question then that makes me wonder, so that, do we know which DSPs elected not to flow through the money to MLC?
We don't know that yet, because again, the deadline is not for another couple of weeks, and so we're waiting to see as well who will do that. We will make an announcement about that pretty quickly, high level ones, so that folks know that we did get some money and the DSPs from whom we got it. And then again, we're going to set out to do a whole lot of work to clean up that data and put it in a format that will allow us to make it available in the portal and for public search, so that folks can then look at it and try to help match it by claiming works that they believe are theirs. So again, we don't know that today, but in 2 weeks we'll know more.
Great. Well, it's exciting. It sounds like I can't think of a reason not to join if you're self-published. It sounds like something that we really need for the work that you guys are doing.
Yes, and normally an answer like that for me might sound self-serving, but I want to make this point. The MLC is also unique in that our entire governance structure is driven by rights holders. Our board is comprised of self-administered songwriters, small publishers, and large publishers. There are 3 segments. But every single board member either is someone who will be paid or works for an organization that is responsible for making sure that rights creators, songwriters get paid. And the same is true for advisory committees. We have 3 advisory committees with more than 30 people on it. And all of those members are either songwriters or publishers, or in the case of an operations committee, we have some digital service reps too. So everything we do is governed by you, our rights holders, and we do it for your benefit. So again, membership is a benefit that exists because you lobbied for this as rights holders, and the solution that the law represents is one that you wanted. So we're just here to deliver on that and hopefully fulfill the promise of the law for your benefit.
Well, that's great. Well, I feel like I've taken more than my share of the time. Maybe we should open it up for questions.
Let's do it. Looks like we got 19 questions in the Q&A, which is fantastic. So let's see how many I can get through, and I can stay a little bit after the hour if you and others can, so we don't have to cut it off that quickly. Tim asked, and I'm just taking this from the top right now to be fair, I'd like to know what the parameters are for presenters of live streaming concerts by artists performing covers. So Tim, I'm going to punt on this question only because, again, the MLC does not administer rights that relate to live streams. Those implicate performance rights for sure, and there could be some form of mechanical that's required behind the scenes, but that is not a mechanical that we would administer. So again, that's something that falls outside of our purview, and I don't want to speak too broadly about things that are not our expertise. But it's a great question, and one that I know is of interest, since in this pandemic world, live streaming has become a much bigger deal than it was before. Al, on the topic of sending my music out to services, radio stations, and record companies, is it preferable to send out a Spotify, iTunes link, or an actual hard copy CD? That's a really fascinating question. I don't know that there's a right answer in terms of the mechanics of it, but one of the things that we talk about a lot with folks who write for film or TV, where that's quite a common practice, to put your music up on the streaming services and then to send folks links to playlists of your music, is if you do that and the receiving party listens to your music on those services, they're generating revenue, right? Because every time a music supervisor listens to your music on Spotify, they're a listener like any other. So I certainly think there's an advantage there to sending the link, because it also generates revenue. And why not get a little money when someone's listening to your music to see if they want to do another deal with you that'll get you an additional set of money. But again, there's also the logistics of that. And if you prefer to send out hard copy CDs, certainly can. If you're doing it and you're the songwriter, you're entitled to essentially grant yourself a mechanical license to reproduce your song on your own CD and send it out for your purposes. And you don't have to get a license from yourself to do that. So,
yeah, and also the reality in the bluegrass broadcasting space is that there are still a lot of stations that aren't equipped to actually play something that's not a physical copy.
it's a great point. And again, that's where I think, as Allison suggests, the practical side of this should drive that. You want to make sure the person you're sending it to can use it as easily as possible. You don't want the link to be the reason that they don't play your song on the radio. David, how often will the MLC distribute royalties? I think I touched on that. It's going to be monthly. And if you go to our webpage in the How It Works section under the Royalty Payments tab, we have a couple of visuals that talk about the lag time. Right now, when we launch the process, it'll be roughly 75 days from the end of the month. And that's because under the regulations that the Copyright Office passed, the digital services have up to 45 days to send us their data, and then we take 30 days to run all the rest of the process that we've got to run. So right now it's 75 days from the end of each month, and we certainly hope over time that we can shorten that period, but we've got to crawl before we walk and walk before we run. So 75 days at the outset. Can you please give me an example of mechanical rights organizations? Outside the US, that's going to force me to think about my alphabet soup. I know in Australia there is APRA, AMCOS, and I believe APRA is the performing organization and AMCOS is the mechanical organization, and then together. And I think in the UK it's MCPS. Maybe some of my colleagues can do a little looking online and provide them. But generally speaking, in almost every country around the world, there is a performing rights society that administers performing rights. There's a mechanical rights society that administers mechanical rights. And then in a number of instances, those organizations have now started to merge. So it could be that they're a joint organization that does both under one name, or they're a joint organization that still does it under both names. But the best thing to do is to kind of do some internet searches that include mechanical society in the country you're interested in. You'll pretty quickly be able to get that.
One of the challenges in my experience has been that you can't, if you're not a resident of some of these territories, you can't join. Yes,
and there are a lot of nuances around performing rights that kind of bring that up, particularly on the sound recording side, where in most other countries, there's actually a performance right for all uses of sound recordings, not just digital uses, which is the extent of the law here. So yeah, there are definitely challenges outside the US. And again, I do not purport to be an expert on that. So forgive me, I can't provide more information other than to acknowledge that it can be complicated, and you definitely have to, look at that on a country by country basis. That's why sometimes the partner route is a great one, because there are companies out there that do this for a living, and they're experts in figuring out how to get the rights for you from all these countries, and you would certainly benefit from their expertise. Kevin asked, I am a songwriter and a publisher. Can I join as both a songwriter and a publisher? So the question depends, Kevin, on how you manage your songs. If you set up a publishing company and you essentially publish for yourself and others, you can join as a publisher. And then, of course, we'll pay you as a publisher. But if you want to set your own songs up under your own entity and then set up your publishing company separately to collect monies for the other artists, the other songwriters for whom you serve as a publisher, you can do that too. So it really depends on how you set up your business. The one thing I would say that your question may be hinting at, Kevin, is unlike the situation in the performing space, the performance royalty space, in the mechanical space, the law does not divide up the money into designated pools for writers and publishers. There is no songwriter share and publisher share in the mechanical space. And often that's why self-administered songwriters may have set up companies, because they both need to collect the songwriter share of their monies from the PROs as songwriter members, and then they set up a publishing company to collect the publishing share because they're wearing both hats. So for us, you don't have to do that, but you may find that it's easier for you to set yourself up with us using your publishing entity and then collect 100% of the mechanicals through your publishing entity. That's a choice. And again, our support team can talk with you more about the nuances around the pros and cons of making that choice. Dejan, hope I pronounced that correctly. So is the MLC currently getting their data from HFA for the time being? So again, we got all of our data at the outset from HFA. We'll continue to get updates from them as and if they receive updates, because as a vendor, that's one of the things that we've hired them to do. But if you become a member and you set up your portal account with us, you'll be able to submit your data directly to us. There are two ways you can do that right now. You can literally upload data on a work-by-work basis, and there's a really user-friendly form that you can use. I think it's a series of 4 or 5 screens where we prompt you to answer questions like, what is the name of the song, who's the writer? And then if you follow through all those questions at the end of the process, you can submit that and it creates a registration. You can also upload data on multiple songs if you are comfortable putting it into an Excel template. And you can upload a bunch of data at once through a bulk upload process. So those are 2 ways that you can send your data directly to us. And I would encourage you to do that because the portal is brand new, it's really user-friendly, and it was designed for individual people to do just what I described. Some of you that are more, that are managing larger catalogs, or maybe if you have a publishing company, you're used to submitting data using a format called CWR, which stands for Common Works Registration. That process may be one that you want to continue using. And that's an example of a way where it probably still makes sense to send those CWR files to HFA if you're set up to do that, but you could also send that to us. So again, those are the 3 ways you can do it. But in the portal, if you pick one of those 2 ways, you're sending it directly to us, and you can absolutely do that, and we would love for you to do it. Co, I think I touched on this, but I'll just repeat it because it's an important question. When will Black's royalties be distributed? The answer is as soon as we're able to get the data cleaned and set up and in our system so that you can see it, and we can begin to match it, we'll begin distributing it. And then, years from now, when we feel that we've exhausted those matching efforts, we might also distribute the remaining amounts through that market share mechanism that the law provides. But again, for the next few months at least, we're going to have a lot of work to do just to get the data in shape to make it available in the portal or on the public search so that you can actually see it and we can all look at it and try to match it. So not certainly before the late spring, possibly early summer, and we'll know more in the coming month when we actually get the data. Right now, I don't have the data. Daisy, if you signed up with CD Baby to distribute your recordings and collect royalties, what's the difference between what CD Baby does and what the MLC does? And is it possible to sign up with both? So this is a great specific question that kind of gets to, again, those companies that provide lots of services. CD Baby is an example of a company that distributes sound recordings. So if you own sound recordings, they can get them up on the digital services for you. But they're also a company that offers publishing administration services or publishing collection services. So if you are both a songwriter and a sound recording owner, you can hire them to do both things for you. Both get your sound recordings up on the digital services that we will be collecting from, and then collect your royalties. In that way, they will act like a publisher in that they will collect mechanicals on behalf of songwriters. Publishers obviously do a lot of other really important things, starting with the whole creative role of a publisher, which is to help you develop your creative voice, connect you with other writers that can help you with good co-writes, and then place your music. But those companies like CD Baby and Songpress, they're also good at the payment piece. So they don't do what we do, but they can and will be members with us so that they can collect those monies on your behalf if that's how you choose to do it. Again, you have that choice, and those are some of the choices that you can make. Allison, do you think that was a good explanation? Because I'm sure that's a question that a lot of your members are thinking about, because right now they're like, okay, how do I do this? Who's my partner? And I think there are more than 30 companies out there that you can use in the US market to get sound recordings onto digital services. So there are a lot of companies that you might be working with today as a self-administered creator. And then, many of them increasingly are offering this publishing admin service as well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a great answer. And, the fact that it's so difficult to collect any foreign mechanicals, I guess on the performance side, it tends to flow pretty well to the PROs in the US, but certainly the mechanical side is really difficult. And it probably is a good argument for considering some of those services on the publishing admin side.
Yes, that is certainly their expertise. And, if you go to their websites, they're quick to tell you, we collect money for you in 60 countries around the world or 80 countries. And if you've got a big international following, that might be the kind of company that makes sense for you, because it's hard to do this for 20 countries. It's certainly a lot easier if you're only worried about the US.
That's true. And a lot of the royalty streams that we're talking about are so minuscule because of the rates. That's the other thing. It's like weighing the benefit versus the amount of time and cost to execute.
Exactly right. One of the criticisms that many people level about streaming is the payments are low, and the reason from a business model perspective is because instead of essentially pre-purchasing the right to listen to music for the rest of your life, which is what you were doing when you were buying a physical record or a download, right? I mean, how many of us have vinyl records from 30 years ago that we can still listen to, right? You basically bought that record in 1978 and you've been listening to it ever since then, and you just prepaid for the ability to listen to it back in 1978. Great deal if you did it. Streaming services charge you every time you listen. So, the downside is you're not getting all that money up front, but the upside is you'll keep getting that money for as long as people listen to your music. And that means that revenue stream could extend out for decades. But it's a very different business model. And it means that in countries where you're not generating a lot of revenue, just as Allison said, it may not be worth it for you to do all this work to collect a relatively small amount of money in a distant country. But it's still your money and you don't want to leave it behind. Sam asked, which organizations will you be receiving usage data and money from? Again, if you go to our website, go to the How It Works tab and then click on the Notices tab, you will see a list of all the services that have sent us notices of license. That's the requirement under the law that they need to do in order to operate under the blanket license. There are 30 companies there and counting. So there are already 30 DSPs that will be sending us usage data and royalties. And that list will grow as we receive notices. So check that out. You can see all the information about the services. In the notices, it even tells you the types of services they offer under the blanket. So if you're wondering, is that a streaming service or a download service or both? In the notice, it will actually tell you that. So they're pretty interesting to look at.
Can
Jerry.
I ask one more question, Chris, that I had that came up when you were saying that you guys aren't collecting any royalties pertaining to audiovisual? That made me wonder, is YouTube under your license, your blanket?
That's a great question. And YouTube is a not tricky, but it's a yes and no answer, because one of the services that YouTube operates is, of course, the one that we've all known for many years. It's the video service. Think cat video with your song or a sound recording of your song in the background. right? Someone has uploaded a video where they have synchronized a sound recording of your musical work with a video that they filmed on their phone. That combination of video elements with audio requires a synchronization license. And the MLC does not administer synchronization licenses. Again, we're not allowed to do it. So for that aspect of the service, we will not be a conduit for the revenue that you get on that. You're still going to need to connect with a company that collects those YouTube monies. And again, HFA and MRI are two companies that administer audiovisual rights in that space. So that's a reason why you might want to keep in touch with them. But YouTube also now has YouTube Music, which is a more traditional audio-only service that looks like the Spotify or Amazon Music or the Apple Music streaming service. And that is a service that qualifies. The portion of the copyright law that kind of lays out the parameters for this is a part of the law, section 115. And sometimes some of you that deal with the business life might hear about that. So the law provides some general parameters around what falls within section 115 and what does not. But what we're seeing now as more and more services spin up and the service offerings that those services offer become more diverse is lots of different flavors of that. So one of the things that the MLC will be spending a lot of time on is really looking at those to make sure that the activity that the services are paying to us does in fact fall within the bounds of the law. But if you see on a service a sound recording of your work coupled with a video, that's a pretty clear indication that that's a synchronization use. So traditional YouTube, TikTok, services like that, especially services where the video is something that a user creates, a fan creates, those are all audiovisual uses that do not qualify for the blanket license and therefore will need to be cleared with you separately or through a company that does that for the service.
Thanks.
Should we try and tackle Jerry's question?
Let's go
in
for
the
it.
first graphic, it said at the bottom something effective. It is unclear whether or not downloads will use the service. Yes, so again, there are two parts to this. Will download services elect to operate under the blanket? And I think many of them will. But the second part of it is, will they essentially say, but we don't want you, the MLC, to administer the mechanicals for us because we are going to instead choose to continue to rely on those mechanical licenses that the record companies or distributors secured from us and then passed along to the digital services. So again, think about that today, right? If you're a writer and your songs have been recorded for records, whether they be vinyl, CD, cassette, 8-track, or digital downloads, the way that your rights were cleared was probably by the record company securing a mechanical license from you or your publisher or someone else that represents you. And those mechanical licenses were secured on a work-by-work basis, on a product-by-product basis, or maybe for all of the records that company releases. Allison's company, I'm sure, secures mechanical licenses like that for their records, the records they sell, physically or digital. Digital services have the right to continue operating under those licenses. That's how they've been operating today. So what I think will happen in the short term is many, if not most, of the download services will say, we want the blanket, but we're going to carve out all of the music on our service for now and continue to operate under those pass-through licenses. The one thing that we will be able to do that wasn't happening before is we'll still be able to get, because they're still required to give us all their usage data. And so we are planning to pass that usage data on to you. So you might see all the usage data from a download service in your royalty statement or the detail file, but you won't see the money because the service has said, we're going to keep paying through the record company under the pass-through. But for the first time, you'll now have all the details of how many downloads took place on that service that you can compare with your statements from the record companies to see if you're in fact getting paid all the mechanicals that you were owed. We think that's going to be a really helpful way to provide more visibility to what's happening under those pass-throughs. And then again, over time, it is likely that some of the download services will migrate toward the blanket and stop relying on the pass-throughs. And it's entirely possible. I think it's actually quite likely that what will happen first is some new download services will start up and they'll just operate entirely under the blanket from the outset. So that was the asterisk there. And Jerry, your eyes were really great in catching it. We don't always get into that level of detail because it is nuanced. And for many people, it's hard to understand all that if you're still struggling with, does this relate to sound recordings or musical works? Is this the same thing as a performance license? But hopefully that helped answer your first question. Your second one, I'm going to try to boil this down. Will this create confusion for music users? I think all of this has the potential to remain confusing because it is complicated. For as simple as the music business can be, right? As a fan or a creator, we make music, we listen to music, and it's that simple. The business side has always been complicated. And Allison, I'm sure you could speak to that because you've been doing it at a high level for 25 years. It's hard. So the MLC will streamline parts of it, but by no means does the MLC or the MMA simplify the music business. That's why we're spending so much time on webinars like this, trying our best to explain how all of this fits together, because we know it was already complicated, and we're now one more thing that you have to understand. And our hope is that in the course of introducing ourselves to you and helping you understand what we will do, we can also help to clarify maybe some of the confusion you had about how the other parts of the business work. And again, the better you understand all those pieces, the better able you'll be to make sure you're getting paid on all those revenue streams that you're entitled to be paid on. And Allison, have you anything to share there? Because again, I'm sure you would you know how complicated it is. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, when we started 25 years ago, it was possible to do royalty accountings in Excel on a spreadsheet because really you were just, paying on a unit sold. And now we're dealing with millions of lines of data a month. So it has gotten exponentially more complicated. And within that complication, there's lots of room for things to become less and less transparent.
Yes.
Too. And so, I really do appreciate the work you guys are doing because it has been a challenge with the DSPs, figuring out how you're going to collect these fractions of pennies from these different revenue streams. So
yeah,
it helps to have you guys for sure.
Yeah, and I think you touched on what is a touchstone for us. We have 4 guiding principles that we have used to inform everything we do at the company, and one of them is transparency. The law writes in the law itself that we need to be transparent. So we're going to try as hard as possible to be as transparent as we can, and to use opportunities like this through educational outreach to help people understand how things work so that you understand it. But it is complicated, and that is a function of, again, the way that the law works in this area. Just the fact that there are these 2 sets of rights that originate from this thing that we often don't think of as 2 different things, right? Music, that is the first complication. But it reflects the fact that there are incredibly talented songwriters, and that's all they do. And they're incredibly talented performers, and that's all they do. And each one of those creators is entitled to be paid for their hard work, their creativity. And for those of you who do both, because you're multi-talented, you should be paid for both of the things that you do. Even if when we consume that and we listen to it, it's just one thing to us. It's a great song that moved us. I'm going to keep going through the other questions, Jerry. I know there was some more there. And looks like there was another question down there. So can you restate what black box money is? Yeah, Tracy, black box is a term that people came up with to describe those monies that were not paid properly, that rights holders have really a tough time understanding more about. So the idea was those monies are hidden off in some black box, right? It's black because there's no light inside and you can't see it. You know it's there, but you really can't see anything about it. And that's the term that was used to describe it. So again, we're hoping to bring those monies out into the sunlight where you can see them and help to claim them, because again, it's your money. It was generated by your works, people listening to your works, and in that way, we'll take it out of the darkness into the light, and maybe, at least for this aspect of the business, retire that term or make it less important. How much does membership cost? Terry, great question. Free. Again, the law requires the DSPs to pay 100% of our operating costs. That means we will not deduct an admin fee from anything that we pay you, any of the royalties we pay you. That is a unique feature of the law. It's hard to do the things that we do, and it costs money. And that's why, a constant struggle at a lot of these other organizations that do what we do is how do we do this effectively and not charge so much money to our members that they don't get the royalties that they're due. And thankfully for us, that's not an issue because the digital services pay 100% of our operating costs. Shauna asked, can you please show the graphics one more time? I don't know which graphics, Shauna, that will be tough, but there are a lot of graphics on our website. So what I would say is go there and you can see lots of graphics that I think will be similar to the ones that you've seen. And some of the newest ones that you may have seen today that are not yet there, they'll be up soon. And you can always write to us in the support team and say, hey, there was this chart. We'll find a way to get to you. If I personally need to, I will be happy to show it to you. So connect with us through the support team. Check out our website. Let's see if I missed any. Dave, because, well, it's 15. We may not get to all of them. Allison, we're 15 minutes after the hour. I want to be respectful of your time and others. Are you able to go a little longer?
Yeah, let's get through the questions.
Okay, great. Let's keep doing it. Is there any update on the status of the rate appeal that was ran to the CRB? Great question. There has not been an update other than that the CRB is not yet going to address the issue until they address the issue more formally. So that is an open question. We will be paying in the short term based on the rates that applied as of the last rate setting. And then if and when the latest rate setting that I think covered the 2018 to 22 period, once that gets finalized, we will likely wind up doing a true up set of payments going back to January because we'll have to true up to whatever the rates are. But right now that's pending. So good question, David. That's one where I'd encourage you to connect with some of the advocacy organizations like Nashville Songwriters, NSAI, or the NMPA. Those are the groups that are lobbying for rights holders in those proceedings, and they can certainly keep you up to date on the status of the CRB proceedings. And yes, Tracy, any unmatched you have, exactly. Glad that I did a better job of explaining that. Patrick, how can one be certain that an original song is correctly registered, thus set to receive potential future revenue? Go to our website, click on the yellow button on the top right, public search, type in the name of the song. Hopefully there aren't too many songs by the same name, and check the data. It's really that simple. And I would encourage all of you to do that if you're songwriters. I've been doing that this past month now that the public search is up when I talk with songwriters one-on-one. And a lot of them find it really fun because if you've written 100 songs, you might have forgotten how many songs you've written, or you're like, oh, I forgot about those, or right, I did that with those co-writers. But it's all there. It's really easy to see. And if it says 100%, then that means 100% of the shares were claimed. And then hopefully you will see your publishing entity, if you're self-published, or your publisher's name, where we list the shares and who's collecting those. And if it says less than 100%, that means one of the writers is not set up to be paid. And it's usually pretty easy to figure out if it's you or someone else, because you'll know your publishing company and you'll know the publishing companies of your co-writers. So it's all there on the website, and it's as simple as putting in the name of your song. So I'd encourage you to do that. Gosh, I don't know if I'll pronounce this name correctly, Jael. I hope I did. How are services like DistroKid impacted by the MLC? So again, DistroKid is a service that provides distribution services to sound recording owners. So to the extent a service offers those distribution services, they won't be impacted by us directly because we simply receive the mechanicals that come from the uses or the listens of your song once DistroKid has helped you get it to those services. But services like DistroKid may begin offering or may already be offering publishing administration services. If they do, hopefully the MLC will make it easier for them to offer those services because just like you, if they become a member with us, then they'll be able to collect mechanicals from all of those digital services that are now paying them through the blanket license to us, rather than having to collect them individually from each service. So again, it should make their role as a publishing administrator easier. But not every distributor of sound recordings also offers those services. So if you use a service like DistroKid, you need to check on their website to see if that's something they offer. I don't think DistroKid does offer publishing admin today. But again, I don't want to pretend to know exactly what every one of those 30+ services offers today. You should check the website if you're a customer. or ask their customer service, and they can quickly let you know if that's something they do and if it's something that you've chosen for them to do or can. Jeff, if I've been receiving mechanical royalties through a publishing service, so again, same question, but is the MLC likely to increase the royalty amount that I receive or simply tighten the process? It's funny, I kind of think of those as sort of the same. The MLC doesn't affect the rates. So in that way, if you're already getting 100% of the mechanicals you're entitled to, you won't suddenly get a higher amount. But I do think we will make it easier for them to make sure that they are collecting 100% of the mechanicals that you're entitled to receive. So in that way, right, many people today might not be getting all of their mechanicals. Maybe they're only getting 80%. And the MLC may make it easier for those companies to get you to 100%. We also know that there are self-administered songwriters out there who have never collected a mechanical from a digital service. Right? Many performers and songwriters, self-administered creators, they make most of their money in live gigs, and then they sell CDs at the merch table at the back. And maybe they've got their music up on these services, but they've viewed it more as it's just marketing or just a way to kind of get exposure. And of course, it does those things, but it also generates revenue. And now you have a chance, hopefully, to connect with that revenue stream much easier, because you can connect with one company, us, and then be connected to the revenue streams for, again, 30 plus DSPs and counting. So in that way, we could be helping those creators collect these mechanicals for the first time, and that will certainly be an improvement. But the rate is not what's changing by virtue of the MLC. The process by which those monies get to you is hopefully going to be more efficient, more streamlined, and that will ensure that you get all of it. It's kind of like when you have a pipe on the street and a water main, it has a leak. You're still getting water in your sink, but you're not getting all the water that came through the system. Some of it's leaking out to the ground. And that's terrible from an environmental perspective with wastewater. It's even more terrible from a revenue perspective, because those leaks are not water, that's your money. So we're hoping to eliminate some of the leaks and the process and make sure that more of your revenue gets through your taps in your house or your bank account to you. So I think I covered those couple of questions. I'm going to keep going down. Mike, have you ever talked about acquiring first use mechanicals? So the law is very specific in that regard, Mike. The first use right continues, and we are not allowed to administer that. So if you wrote a song and someone wants to record that for the first time, you still have the right to say yes or no. And that's an important right that rights holders have had historically, and I think it's important. It was important for them to maintain it. Certainly that was what the rights holder community wanted. So you still get to control that first use. But of course, once you say yes to that first use, then the person who's using it, the royalties that first use generates, those can still flow through the MLC. But the permission to release that record featuring your work for the first time, that's still something that they'll need to get. And I think I just caught that question. So yeah, we got it twice. John, I'm looking at the songs I've registered with the MLC. At least half my songs aren't there. I registered all of them once through the bulk method on January 24th. So good question. If you did it on January 24th, that isn't that long ago, and it is not an instantaneous thing. It's not like you hit submit and boom, they're there. And the reason for that is logical, though maybe not obvious, and that is, if all we did was just accept everything that people submitted, then there is a real possibility that some people in the world might not register songs that are theirs. So we have a process behind the scenes of reviewing those registrations and trying to make sure that they are legitimate. And we do that, of course, to protect you, right? We want to make sure that only real rights holders register songs that they have a right to. So that process behind the scenes is nuanced, and it's one that we don't talk about on purpose because we don't want people to know how it works, because then that might help them game the system. But if you submitted that file on January 24th, it is not surprising to me that it's still in the works, but hopefully it'll end soon. And I'm going to make sure that one of my colleagues, Kayla, would you make sure that we checked that name and pass that to our support team so they can take a look on our end and see what's going on. And if you call our support team, they can check in on the status of that bulk upload and make sure there are no issues. I think that's always a good answer to any question like that. If you have done something in the portal and it doesn't look like it worked, call the support team. They can very easily check behind the scenes to see what's going on and make sure that there isn't an issue. Don't wait and hope for the best. even though I think it will all work out. We want to make sure that it worked out. I have Jerry, I have had over 500 different songs recorded. So hats off to you, because that's a ton of music that you have delivered to the world that we're all enjoying. And again, there is a bulk upload template that you can use. It's an Excel form. So if you can put all your data into that Excel form, then you can upload all of that data at one time. I'd probably recommend that you break it up into chunks, maybe do 30 at a time, not all 500. Because again, that bulk load process is a little more sophisticated, and we don't want you to waste a lot of time and then have it fail because there's one issue with one work. But you can certainly use that and upload big chunks at a time. And I would encourage you to do that. Let's see, Ralph, I'm noticing that Spotify has a video element synced with the audio whenever streaming certain recordings. So does that fall within your purview? Again, great question. And that's an example of how over time services expand into other areas. And those other areas may not fall under what we do. Someone else asked about podcasts and music that ends up in podcasts. So music in podcasts has to be separately licensed, because they're not just playing your music or making your music available. They're now saying, I want to put your music in this program that I'm compiling, and that's a different right. So the answer is no on the video content in Spotify. No, if your music is used in a podcast, you still get to license that separately. And that's an example of how, again, the lines start to get very blurry, because as more and more people consume music digitally, there are more and more ways for companies that deliver music to do that in creative ways. And we'll try to keep up with it as best we can to make sure that we're clear on what we are paying you on and what we are not. Those notices are a great place to check. If you don't see the company there, then they're not paying us mechanicals, and that means that someone else should be. And again, Terry, you asked a similar question. If a service like CD Baby is used to distribute your music to multiple streaming platforms, do you pay out after they take a percentage? We pay out before, right? We pass through 100% of the mechanicals we receive to you or the partner that you have chosen, whether that be a music publisher, pardon me, that was my phone ringing, a music publisher, an administrator, a CMO. From there, what you receive depends on your deal. So if you had a pub deal, maybe you have a 75-25 split and you get 75% of the mechanicals, publisher keeps 25. That's not an uncommon split. The distributors, I'm sure, take a fee. I don't know offhand what those are, but they would then take their fee. So we pass 100% to whomever we pay, and then it's up to them and you, to decide how it gets split up from there. And you'll have to check with your partners to determine exactly what that split looks like. Should we try to get the last one? Yeah, one more. We're here, let's do it. David, most of my songs are in a music library that owns the publishing. And will these libraries be paid royalties for my songs if the library, did not place the song in that particular use? That's an interesting question. So I'm gonna maybe reframe it like this. If you wrote a song and you've essentially sold that to someone else, such that you no longer receive any payments from them, they very well could receive mechanicals from us and not have an obligation to pay you. So it really depends on the use. As I'm sure many of you know, in the sync space, often when you write a song for a film, especially a large film, they buy the song out because they want to make sure they have all the ways possible to make money off that song, and they want to pay you once, and hopefully they pay you a lot of money, and that's it. Sometimes they might buy out the use for the film, and then they have the right to distribute the film on DVD, Netflix, all the different services, but they'll agree to pay you a mechanical. Sometimes they'll leave the mechanicals with you entirely, but they'll buy out all the rights for the video uses. So it really comes down to the deal that you've got. But certainly when you say music library, I think of companies like production music companies. Often their business model involves buying out those rights entirely. And if that's the deal, then they would have the right to collect those mechanicals from us because they're now the owner of the work, and we'll pay them. And hopefully you've retained some rights such that you get a piece of that. But again, it just depends on the deal. Okay.
We did it.
Yeah, which is always our goal, to get that Q&A down to 0. Well, again, I want to thank you all. It looks like we still have 62 people, 54 attendees that stuck with us for what was an hour and a half. That's fantastic. I know it was a lot of information. We really tried hard to break it down and kind of start with the basics. But again, if you have questions, contact our support team by phone, by email. And once you get your member account set up, you can reach them in the portal via chat. And we'll spend as much time as we need answering any questions you have. And Allison, I hope that we can have the chance to do this again with your organization. We'd love to come back again in a couple months and just fill you in, talk more, answer more questions. Any excuse I can find to spend some time with you, I would love to do it. And again, it was just such a privilege to be here with you. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Chris. That was great, really informative. And I know everyone appreciates it.
Okay. Well, I hope to meet all of you someday soon. And in the meantime, please stay safe. And thanks so much for joining us.